Last winter, my friend Colin and I decided to escape the monotony of our small-town lives by spending a week in a cabin deep in the Alaskan forest. The idea of snow-covered trees and peaceful nights by a fire felt like a dream. The drive to the cabin started uneventful, but as the road narrowed, the trees seemed to close in, casting long shadows that danced in the fading sunlight. By the time we arrived, the horizon was ablaze with fiery orange, and the cold, creeping darkness settled around us. The cabin itself was small and rustic, its fireplace crumbling with age. The forest around it was oppressively quiet, as if the trees were holding their breath. After unpacking, we decided to explore before nightfall. The snow crunched beneath our boots as we walked the narrow path winding between pines. Then we heard it, a scream. At first it was distant, almost swallowed by the wind, but it grew louder, sharper, and more desperate. Colin, ever the brave one, insisted we investigate. Every step deeper into the woods felt like entering another world, one colder and darker than the last. The screams led us to an old, decrepit cabin with a flickering light. The air smelled of rot and something metallic. When Colin wiped frost from the grimy window, his face turned ghostly pale. "There's a man tied to a chair," he whispered, his voice trembling, "and another one, wearing a mask, with a knife." Before we could react, a voice boomed behind us. "What are you doing?" We spun around, our breath freezing in the air, and there he was, a tall figure cloaked in shadows, his hood hiding his face. Without hesitation, we bolted back to our cabin, the sound of heavy footsteps chasing us. Slamming the door, we locked it, turned off the lights, and waited. The forest outside was empty, but the silence felt wrong. Hours later, the authorities arrived. They found nothing but an empty, decayed cabin and a broken chair. 2 days later, they called us to say they'd found the men but refused to explain further. To this day, I can't shake the memory of that masked man or the voice that still haunts my dreams. It was January 2019, and California had been transformed by a rare, heavy snowstorm. The streets were unrecognizable, blanketed in untouched white. For most, it was a novelty, an unexpected, almost magical change from the usual sunny weather. For me, it was the beginning of a nightmare. That night, I was home with my parents, enjoying the quiet that only snow brings. The storm had knocked out power across the neighborhood, and the only source of light in our house was the flickering glow of candles. Outside, the snow reflected an eerie luminescence, bathing the world in an almost supernatural calm. Around 3 a.m., I woke up, needing to use the bathroom. The cold air in the house was biting, and I shuffled through the darkness, trying not to trip over the furniture. As I passed by the living room window, I paused to take in the view. The snow outside was perfect, pristine and untouched, stretching out like a blank canvas beneath the orange glow of the streetlights. I lingered there for a moment, watching as snowflakes drifted lazily from the sky. It felt oddly peaceful. Then, I noticed something, a faint movement at the edge of the yard. I squinted, trying to make out the shape, but it was gone before I could register what it was. I convinced myself it was nothing and went back to bed. Just as I was drifting off, I heard it, a faint click from downstairs. My eyes snapped open, and my heart began to race. It's just the wind, I thought. The storm must have loosened something outside. But then I heard it again, louder this time, a deliberate metallic click. Every nerve in my body was screaming at me to stay in bed, but curiosity got the better of me. I slipped out from under the covers, careful not to make a sound, and crept to the top of the stairs. From there, I could see the living room bathed in pale candlelight, the shadows of furniture stretching across the walls like ghostly figures. The front door was closed, but something felt off. I strained my ears, holding my breath, and that's when I heard it. A faint shuffling sound, like someone moving quietly, but with purpose. I hurried back to my room, locked the door, and climbed under the covers, my heart pounding so loudly I was sure whoever was downstairs could hear it. The shuffling eventually stopped, and the house fell silent once more. The next morning, the storm had subsided, and sunlight poured through the windows, making the events of the night feel like a bad dream. That is, until my mom screamed. Her jewelry box had been ransacked. My dad's wallet, which he had left on the kitchen counter, was missing. The realization hit us all at once. Someone had been inside the house. We checked the front door, but it was still locked. No windows were broken, and there were no signs of forced entry. It was as if the intruder had appeared and vanished like a ghost. That's when I remembered the faint movement I'd seen in the yard the night before. I ran to the window and looked down at the snow. My stomach dropped. There, leading from the side of the house to the neighbor's yard, were a set of footprints. They were deep and distinct, the kind you'd expect from heavy boots. But here's the chilling part. There were no footprints leading to the house, only away. Feeling a mix of dread and urgency, we reviewed the footage from our CCTV camera. The screen flickered as the recording played back the events of the night. At first, everything seemed normal, just an empty snow-covered yard. Then, at around 3:05 a.m., a figure appeared. The person was tall, dressed in dark clothes that made it hard to see their face. They moved slowly, almost methodically, scanning the windows as they circled the house. And then, they stopped. The figure stood perfectly still outside the kitchen window, staring in. My blood ran cold when the camera switched to the next frame. There I was, standing in the kitchen, getting a glass of water, completely unaware of the man standing just inches away, on the other side of the glass. He didn't move, didn't try to break in. He just watched. The police said there wasn't much they could do. The snow had likely covered the intruder's tracks before we noticed, and the camera footage didn't capture a clear view of his face. They chalked it up to a random burglary, but deep down, I knew it was more than that. To this day, I can't shake the feeling that the intruder wasn't just there to steal. He had been watching us, studying us. And sometimes, late at night, I catch myself glancing out the window, half expecting to see him standing there in the snow, waiting for his chance to come back. It was a snowy December night in Minnesota, and I was home alone, curled up on the couch. The house was silent except for the ticking clock on the wall. Then I heard it, a soft, deliberate knocking sound from the basement. I grabbed a flashlight and descended into the dimly lit basement, my breath fogging in the cold air. Everything looked normal until a loud crash shattered the silence. The back door was wide open, fresh snow piled in the doorway, and deep footprints trailed out into the backyard. We called the police. The officers found no signs of forced entry, yet someone had clearly been inside, searching through boxes and drawers. My dad followed the footprints to the road, where they abruptly ended. I still wonder what the intruder was looking for, and whether they found it, or if they'll return to finish what they started.